There are two pieces to the formula when wanting that need for speed. One of them possibly could be a supercar, the other one, great weather. Well, for this week, I at least got one part of the equation. Hey, welcome to this edition of Road Warrior. I'm your host, Grant Roberson. Now behind me is the 2019 McLaren 720S, a supercar that, well, is way out of my league and possibly shouldn't have even been put in my hands. Now the McLaren needs no introduction, well, unless you're one of the hundreds of people that got a chance to look at this vehicle during this week, and well, that was fun just to listen to their guesses. Is it one of those BMWs? Is it that new fancy Lexus? Oh, I heard about Audi has something. Well, no, and then I told them it was a McLaren, and they said, well, who makes that? Well, they do. And they said, well, I don't get it. And I said, well, it's like a Ferrari, like a Lamborghini. And then it all started to piece together. Then the next thing was, well, what does it take to get behind the wheel? And then before I could answer, well, they started throwing out numbers, and they were all over the place. But what was great is when I finally told them it was $350,000 to get behind the wheel, they said, it's not worth it. But what it truly is it's a showstopper. And during this week's stint, it became, well, all about the car, the pictures, the people standing by it, and really the showstopper that this delivers. And, well, just the fact that many of us can't get behind the wheel. What's great is when one's so close, it is so palpable, and, well, we just want to touch it. And that's the presence of McLaren when it enters the area. It just takes everyone's breath away. Now, before I start talking about the sculpting and art of this exterior, the wow factor, a bigger thing to talk about is, well, literally how does it fit into my driveway? And, well, truthfully, how does it fit in the garage? Now, what's great is by the numbers, it's just smaller than a mid-size sedan, even though it looks, well, pretty substantial. Now, by the numbers, it's about 179 inches overall. Wheelbase about 105. Now, just to give you a scale, I'm 6'2", and, well, the roof height just at 4 feet. One big number has to be the width, just around 7 feet wide, and that really comes into play on the open road and even in the nooks and crannies in the city, because it truly fills up the lane. Now, the bigger conversation is, how does this vehicle look? Well, it's obviously, well, quite spectacular, but there's a lot of smarts going on behind this, well, beauty of a car, and what I'm referring to is the flow of air. Now, what you're going to see is, of course, the silhouette, stereotypical, and everyone's going to know for the most part that this is a supercar, but there's a lot of things going on. Now, obviously the air sweeps over, but if you start looking, there's little voids that allow the air to kind of be ingested into this vehicle. Now, obviously this is a mid-mounted engine there at the back end, nothing right up front for us novices like me, but what you'll see is little air ducts here that sweeps through the vehicle. Get to the grill warfare, I'll show you in a second. Lots of nooks and crannies that will take the turbulence out of the air and pushes it around the vehicle. The biggest interesting fact is right through here. Now, there's no radiator inducts or ports here on the side. Instead, what they did is really sculpt the doors. Now, it just kind of looks cool, but what that allows it to do is really sweep the air right through here and really be ingested into that high temperature radiators tucked in on both sides. That's, of course, going to help cool this engine that's sitting right here, and again, help ingest a lot of air to where it's needed. Now, in a vehicle like this, you certainly don't need grill warfare. You have pretty much silhouette prowess as well as power, well, to boot there at the back end. So pretty much all you need up here is a grimacing front end that, well, glares at people should they get in front of you, and, well, after they see this in a review, they'll certainly get in the slow lane. Now, what I like is the headlights are really adaptive and, well, smarts, and it all starts really on both sides. Now, first off, you have this lower light here. That's kind of the daytime running light, the lower light, if you don't have the true headlight on. Now, combined, there's 17 LEDs that make up this area on both sides. Now, what's interesting, only 5 of those are really fixed in place. Now, as this vehicle senses the turn of the steering wheel, it illuminates extra lights in that direction. Basically, that dynamic approach really forecasting the light ahead, and that's great both in the sense of the driver being able to see long before, and also vehicles coming at it really being able to see the light as well. Now, that is absolutely helpful, well, when you get up to speed, because when this thing's cruising down the road, it will a few clicks higher than the speed limit. Definitely having dynamic headlights helps. Now, some other just kind of standard operating during the normal driving is, well, the parking sensors up front. They are, of course, radar-like and really give you a great view there on the center cluster that really allows you to see where the touching points are, because obviously you can see the ground clearance. One thing to stay clear of is really the curbs in the parking spaces. One thing I'd suggest is, well, always backing this vehicle in, because that's really going to allow you to have kind of more of a view of backing in, of course, and really keeping it, well, nose friendly away from the scratches. Now, what I truly like is the ability to raise this front end. Now, it's there on the steering column. Press a button. This is actually going to lift the front. Now, it's helpful when you're going into maybe your driveway or little dips in the road. Slow it down pretty much under 20 miles an hour, and that's going to allow this vehicle to raise up, and it's quite substantial, really giving you a lot of lift. That again is going to help minimize scrapes and dings and maybe even cracks to this body. With this vehicle at idle, it barely hints at what lies beneath, but even that rumble starts to get the heart pumping, and that certainly is helpful when you finally stomp on that gas, because that neck snapping fun, you definitely want to be prepared for. Now, one little point is this does have kind of a fuel economy mode. What I'm referring to is, well, not shutting down cylinders, but actually shutting down the vehicle, and that's going to come into play when it's turned on, basically at stoplights, and so be it. Now, I'm a novice, so one thing I don't like to do is imply like I don't know how to use a clutch. Now, even though this is a 7-speed automatic transmission, everyone around you may not think that. So, of course, when they see this kind of goofy guy sitting there, they just assume, well, I didn't handle the clutch stance quite appropriately. So what I like to do is turn that feature off, just so this rumble's kind of a non-stop feature. Now, as for the numbers, what you're going to see here is a 4-liter twin-turbo V8 engine. Now, this is a 720S, and what's cool is that technically is the horsepower, but not in America. That's kind of overseas. What we have here is technically 710 horses, and that's just because of some difference in measurement and yada, yada, yada. But the other big number is 770 foot-pounds of torque. Really what all that means is 0 to 60 numbers in 2.8 seconds. So 0 to 60 really comes quite quickly. Now, what I tended to do is get 0 to 50, well, in just a little bit less, because I tend to, again, stick to the speed limit and, well, just don't unleash the beast. So this vehicle is meant to be driven, and with that, well, it means you're going to go places. After all, $350,000, it's got to take you plus one somewhere, because, well, it wants to hit the open road. So with that, well, it's got to have room for our cargo. Now, what's great is, well, there actually is some places on the inside, and, well, one right up here up front. Now, it's really easy to gain access, pretty much a button on the inside or right here on the key fob, and once that pops open, it really rises to the occasion. What you're going to see kind of is a deep well, really sunk down about as low as it can go, even right down to about the ground clearance. Now, what you're going to see is around about 5.3 cubic feet of space, and, well, to note, it's better to have soft luggage to kind of squeeze and tuck inside versus a hard case luggage that really just doesn't bend or give to what the limitations are. Now, what's great is there's kind of a shelf there behind the front occupants, and that's going to be a little bit over 7 cubic feet. So combined, this may start to feel somewhat like a sedan. Now, if you dive in a little bit closer, one thing you'll notice is you really do have specialized tires on this vehicle, and so you have this nice puncture repair kit here. Should you get in a bind, it can kind of help you in a pinch. Now, one thing you'll also notice is this little device here. Now, what's interesting is, because I didn't really unleash this vehicle, I say that term quite a bit because this is almost like a thoroughbred horse wanting to get out the gate at the Kentucky Derby. So if you pretty much hang around the city a lot, well, you're not letting this horse out of the stable. So if you don't do that, one thing I noticed is, well, the battery tends to run down. So what they include is actually this right here. It looks like a traditional charger, and what happens is you pretty much plug this in right in this port here, plug this, the rest of it, into your traditional house outlet, whatever. That's actually going to be like a trickle charge to this engine. That's something you're going to need to do if this becomes a daily driver, because after all, where this vehicle really beats up and amps up the charge per se is on the open road, not the, well, city driving. This vehicle makes a fuss, and, well, what I'm referring to is waking up the neighbors when you kind of quietly want to get home. It just lets everyone know, hey, the neighbor is home with that big fancy car. But the rest of it is fairly subtle. Basically, when you get inside, it's, well, nice and refined. When you even walk up to it, so nice and subtle. What I'm referring to is just the vehicle knows you're there. It illuminates. It kind of welcomes you, and, well, it's just welcoming alone just in the exterior. Now, what I like is, well, it's subtle in the sense of when you lock the vehicle. Now, this is a crucial point, because what I found out is, well, when the vehicle's not locked, it tends to stay on and tends to drain the battery. So the way you know it's locked is, well, the mirrors tuck in, and that's another great point, because after all, with its width being as wide as it is with the mirrors out, when those tuck in, well, it makes a little bit less impact zone. Now, what's great, again, you don't have to have this in your pocket, pretty much leave it there. The handle, maybe just a little bit difficult to find at first glance if you don't know where to look, because typically you may go here, may go down here. Actually, you'll feel a little bit of a rubber cladding about right there, pull up, and it releases with these. Now, these are your typical supercar doors that really easily get up out of the way. And what's great is with the amount of lift and angle, it really provides quite a wide area to climb inside. So my first test drive to a vehicle that offered this kind of ingress was back with the BMW i8, and well, my first experience. Now, what was interesting with that vehicle had quite of a learning curve to climb inside, and what I noticed really was that door seal. Once you got over that, well, really the seat almost was sunk down, so the door seal a lot higher and almost like you're straddling a saddle to climb inside. Now this one, dare I say, I'm a little bit cooler to get in? Probably not, just by the exterior facade, but at least it seemed to be a little bit easier in my opinion. Now what I like is it pretty much easy to slide in, really with the amount of height when it comes to that door, really nice and graceful, and really the weight of the door, quite light and easy to pull down. One of the first things you'll notice on the 720S once you climb inside is the cockpit style seating, and for this novice who doesn't spend a lot of time in a supercar, and certainly not on the racetrack, it's to be expected that these seats are going to grip you, because after all, if you get into those S-turns, you're definitely going to hold on to the steering wheel and want the vehicle to hold you in its spot. Now besides that, basically McLaren has pushed all the other measurements about as far out as they can go, meaning everything feels a lot more, well, wider and voluptuous, really right down to where the elbows fall here on the door and in the center console, really providing you a little bit more space when it comes to stretching out. Besides the point of being tight right through the seat, everything else really wide open spaces. Now, the one thing you'll quickly realize with the 720S is it really demands to be on the open road. In the city driving, it feels like a thoroughbred horse at the starting gate of the Kentucky Derby, but you're refusing to let it run. Once you get this vehicle out on the open road, well, it feels so much more at home. What I'm referring to is really in the city driving, just the throttle, the get up and go it wants to do, well, it's just waiting. It's kind of pulsating, wanting you to release the beast. Now, getting on the open country roads, even just going 55, the good old standard speed, it feels so much more comfortable. Now, can it unleash a lot more? Certainly, but I tend to stick to, well, pretty much the speed limit, maybe just a couple clicks extra, I won't lie. But really, this vehicle can be a daily driver, but I would prefer that that daily drive has a good long stretch of road. Now, the one thing you will notice when you drive the 720S is really the drivers around you. Pretty much everyone almost wants you to push this vehicle to its limits. It almost seems like a Toyota Corolla wants to kind of test your boundaries, and well, it can be aggravating because I like to just, again, go to standard operating procedure when it comes to speed limits, but with everyone kind of poking at me and saying, hey, let that thing go, well, every now and then I would creep to around about 58 in a 50-mile-an-hour zone. But what you typically want to do is, well, just let everyone else by, because this vehicle can cruise, and well, you do want to let people at least take some snapshots. And if you're flying by them at 100 miles an hour, well, you simply just fit the bill of what they expect you to do. So this vehicle weighs around about So the 720S weighs around 2,828 pounds, a reduction compared to the 650S, and mainly that's due to the carbon fiber monocage 2, as well as light reductions in the transmission and engine. But all that really comes together, really give you a great power to weight ratio. Now what that is 553 horsepower per ton, and that all equates to a lot more, well, pep in your step. Now, I'm in a non-active mode. Basically means these little switches here on the dash are just not doing anything. But if you engage that, simply hit the active button, then what you're going to do is you're going to have three choices. You have the comfort, the sport, and the track. Now you simply just toggle it in, and what it does is it really changes the gauge cluster a little bit. Instead of the when I'm in sport mode, instead of the speed really being the true number I'm looking at, well, it's actually the tachometer. It's really giving you a nice digital readout. And of course, if you go into track mode, it's really even the next level. Before hitting the start button on the ignition, one thing you may want to do is really marvel at the artisticness that's translated from the outside to the inside of this vehicle with all the sculpting and lines, and again, everything that's going on. Now, really, the innovation is the next key feature on the McLaren 720S, and you can see it both in the form of the gauge cluster and a whole digital readout, as well as the central infotainment system. Now, this is really the heart of everything that's going on when it comes to climate, navigation, what have you. And it really takes just a second to learn the system. Now, there is no integration when it comes to Apple CarPlay or Androids or whatever. It's really its own system that's really independent of all that. Now, first off is you have the little shortcuts down below. Traditional radio here, different mode selects on this side, as well as climate control in the form of this fan speed and navigation, as well as the phone. Now, this is going to be your volume select here as well. Now, when you press the different functions, again, I like the fact that this is a huge screen, nice and vertical, and you'll see this on some other competition. Really, a lot of vehicles going to kind of a vertical display and really housing everything in one central location. But really what I like is just really intuitive. Now, when you go to the climate, I like the fact that everything's right here on the screen. Real easy to change the fan speed just up and down. You can obviously pick what mode you want by selecting the visual sense of where you want the air to go, and of course the temperature in the form of just dragging up and down. This has got to be the most intuitive climate control systems I've seen as of late. If you do plan to go maybe a little bit faster and want that downforce even more pronounced on the back end, well, simply engage the rear spoiler by pressing that button, and well, it adds a little bit more cool factor just in case the standard silhouette's not enough. When it comes to 7-speed automatic transmission, you're going to have it right here when it comes to gear shifting, basically in the form of drive, neutral, and reverse. Now, this is not going to have a standard parking gear in a normal sense, but instead you'll put it in neutral, reach over here, and you're going to want to set the parking brake. Now, it does for this edition Road Warrior, and a test drive behind the wheel of the 2019 McLaren 720S, a vehicle that's far outside of my learning curve, but one that I truly understood its beauty, because it's just a lot more than skin deep. A lot of people get that wow factor, but there's so much more with the sculpt and the aerodynamics and basically the engineering prowess that this vehicle delivers. And that's the essence of a supercar. Sure, it can go 0 to 60 in 2.8, but it's how it does it and how it gets there and the man hours it takes to engineer that. And that, to me, is a piece of art. And well, like any art, it can demand its own price. And well, that truly is what a supercar can do. Now, granted, with power comes great responsibility, and so definitely you want to use it sparingly. Now, as always, thank you for watching this edition of Road Warrior. Keep both hands on the wheel and eyes straight ahead.